In the middle of the night on October 6, 1993, in Hallowell, Maine, a young man with a Scandinavian accent, who was likely in his 20s, was found sitting in the corner of Josh and Kelly Kenny's bedroom. The police were called right away, and the man was taken into custody and questioned there. He identified himself as Peter Still, and he told them he had something horrifying to tell them, but they didn't believe him until they were able to verify part of his story with an item they found on him. Leaving police perplexed. This is a story he told the Hallowell Police Department. What I'm about to tell you will be difficult for your modern ears to comprehend. You will call me crazy. A lunatic who should be locked away forever. He would be wise to listen and heed my words because many others are just like me, and there always will be. You see, people just don't disappear. They always go somewhere, and that somewhere is very, very dark. I was born in the Netherlands in 1563, but it's what transpired in 1587. My life took a catastrophic turn when I was 24 years old. Our small village had been ruled by the Spanish for decades, and they had occasionally been brutal to our people. I remember when I was very young, my father told me to avoid the Spanish soldiers, to avoid eye contact with them, to keep my head down, and to carry on with my business. This continued for years without causing any problems for my parents or 3 siblings, until that fateful day on May 27th. My father jumped up from the table and asked her what had happened. She replied that one of the soldiers had tried to rape her, but she was able to fend him off, accidentally killing him. That was the worst day of my life. 1587. I was the youngest, but I had a brother and 2 older sisters who were very beautiful. It was evening and we were sitting around the table about to eat when my eldest sister came frantically running inside. She was crying hysterically, her clothes were torn and she was bleeding from her nose. When a group of soldiers stormed into our house brandishing swords, my father attacked them without thinking. He was instantly knocked out and killed. My first instinct was to fight them. But my mother grabbed my arm and whispered in my ear, telling me not to do anything. I had to gather all my strength to not fight them as I watched my father die in front of my eyes. One of the soldiers then asked, "What do we do with the rest of them?" "Kill them so we won't need one." The next thing I remember is waking up somewhere in pitch black and hearing a man's raspy voice say, "Hello, Peter." I asked him where he was, and he replied, "You're in the realm, a place between your world and somewhere very dark." I asked him why he was here. Another soldier lunged at me without thinking, and I was quickly met with the end of their swords. As I lay there on the ground, I watched the rest of my family get brutally hacked to death. "You enjoy getting even with your family," he replied. "Yes, without a doubt." He said, "What price is that?" I asked. "You will be immortal and you will do our bidding. There are things always waiting to enter your existence to take what they want, and you will let them." I said, "Take what I asked." "The flesh and souls of the living." He was furious about what had happened to my family, so I agreed right away without thinking through what I was really agreeing to. I was about to walk over and strangle him when I felt a tap on my shoulder and something whispered in my ear, "May I enter?" I fumbled for words, but then remembered what the man's voice said about letting them enter our existence. I stepped aside and said, "You may." It's hard to describe what it was, and I still have a hard time putting it into words. The second I agreed, I was standing in a room with a man fast asleep in his bed. It took me some time to realize that this man was one of the soldiers who had killed my family. How they appear expressed in words, imagine the worst thing possible, and you'll get the idea. When all the soldiers who had killed my family had been killed, the things dragged their bodies, or what was left of them, back into the realm, leaving no trace, not even a speck of blood, and I was placed in what I like to refer to as the dusk. The middle ground between this and this. I then watched, smirking, as a soldier was torn apart as he screamed out in pain. World in the realm, something must approach someone like me and ask for permission before it can enter our world. If I had known the cost, I would not have agreed to it. During the day, I travel the world as an ordinary but immortal man, and at night, I carry out my never-ending agreement. Sadly, I recall every detail of the first time I allowed one of those things to enter our world, which was not for retaliation. I'm not sure where I was when I showed up in that bedroom, but it wasn't my native land. I heard the familiar tap on my shoulder and heard, "May I enter?" I hesitated for a long time, not wanting to acknowledge the thing that kept tapping me, but eventually stepped aside and said, "You may," as I bowed my head. Every day, somewhere different, I stood there staring at the person sleeping peacefully in the bed in front of me. I almost yelled out loud, "No, no, no," realizing there was a small girl, probably no older than 5 or 6. With a shamed expression, the creature approached the child, grabbing her hair and pulling her into a waking position. The child looked up at me, her eyes filled with a fear I will never forget. Before she could cry out, the creature covered her mouth with its hideous-looking hand and snapped her neck. I can still hear the sound of her neck breaking every day. The creature then grabbed the child by the ankle and held her upside down, like a piece of meat, before returning to the realm. This has been happening for centuries, but the victim is always. One night in 1887, though, I appeared in a large room fit for royalty. As I made my way to the bed, I was surprised to see the current king of the Netherlands, William III, lying there. No sooner had I realized this than he sat up in bed, looked at me, and said, "You're one of those that does their bidding for the royalty. Sometimes I'll appear as an old man or a baby. But other times it'll be a random place, but always when it's dark. Realm, aren't you?" I had some surprises when I struggled to find the right words. "Yes, I am. However, Your Majesty, there is no way that you could have entered my room through the exterior." I stood there for a while expecting to be tapped on the shoulder, but nothing happened. I spent the rest of the night talking to William III about a variety of topics. And he asked questions about the realm and everything I'd done and seen. He responded, "The elites of the world know about the realm and have worked out a form of protection from it. Out of the hundreds of nights I've seen, only one stands out in my memory as the most disturbing and turning point in my life. The child killings are the most difficult to witness. And I feel as though a piece of my soul is taken from me every time one occurs." He seemed to be very fascinated by it all. And we even spent the following day conversing as well until evening came and I was sent somewhere else. I'd say we became friends that day. Location: Woodburn, Oregon, fall of 1983. As I entered the bedroom, I saw a sleeping girl, who appeared to be between 12 and 13 years old. Immediately, I thought of her as my older sister. Without thinking, I walked over to her bed, put my hand over her mouth, and said, "Do not scream. I did not mean you any harm. You must leave your room now and run as far away from your house as you can. Do not come back until morning." She lay there, staring at me with her eyes wide open, a terrified expression on her face. Her countenance, I knew she would scream if I took my hand away, so I left it there. I also knew I wouldn't have much time before one of the things arrived. Sometimes it would be an hour. Sometimes it would be a few minutes. Do you get what I'm saying? She did as I was afraid she would and cried out for help as loudly as she could. I lowered my head in sorrow and closed my eyes, knowing what was going to happen. "I'm trying to help you. You must listen to me. Do not scream. Get up and just run." What would happen next? I walked over to the room's corner and waited for everything to happen. The girl's family quickly entered the room, and I could hear them frantically running in. Two small boys, both parents, and all of the chaos. I knew at that point that it would only be a matter of seconds before I felt the dreaded tap on my shoulder. And I was right. I closed my eyes as a thing passed me, asking the father, "What in the hell is that?" in shock as he heard them scurrying to escape the room as the thing approached. Their ghastly screams as something tore them apart. One of the boys cried out, "Stop hurting my family." His screams were abruptly cut off, but his little voice is still remembered to this day. The carnage continued for a few minutes before there was silence. My biggest regret was opening my eyes to see the carnage, blood all over the place, pieces of them scattered. And me crying as I thought about my own family and how this lovely family was slaughtered for no reason at all. For that reason, I made numerous attempts to end my life after that, but no matter what I did, I would always return in the evening to a different location and the cycle would begin again. I eventually gave up and carried on as I had for centuries, but last night I decided I could stand to be suspended in what I call dusk no more. When the thing appeared and asked if I could enter, I said, "You may not," and it turned and returned to the realm. At that point, I felt as though something had taken my soul from my body. Profoundly altered within me, the police attempted to link Peter to the 1983 disappearance of the family in Woodburn, Oregon, but ultimately were unable to charge him with anything. I also knew that I had broken the agreement and that, in addition to becoming a mortal man, when I died, I would become one of the things I had dreaded for so long. I wondered for a very long time what would happen if I refused the entry of one of them. Taken into custody and examined, the only item they discovered in one of Peter's pockets was an old photo of him standing next to William, the former king of the Netherlands. He claimed the photo was taken on the day he had spent with the king. It was verified by an expert and accepted as genuine several months later. Peter was released from prison and never returned. 5 retired officers from the Hallowell department were able to confirm its existence. Subscribe for more spooky horror stories.